Welcome to Building Blocks of India. In this series, we try to understand the way people live by studying different Indian cities and towns. We will explore the thought behind the way cities are planned and how they developed. Hi, I am Sneha Gupta and welcome to our show. We will see how various elements meld, layouts, water sources and the development of building materials to create distinct living entities.
Through this series, we are going to explore the various sciences and technologies that tie into the architectural marvels that populate our country, ranging from the religious to the residential, from the political to economic structures. We start our journey way back in the 3rd century BCE and finish in British India. We will start off with the science that powered the cities of Harappan or Indus Valley civilization. We will study the material science and the city planning of Dholavira, one of the most stunning archaeological finds ever. No civilization is possible without water, and so we will explore the hydrology that powered the dams, reservoirs, step wells, and enormous forts of ancient India. An understanding of the structure, properties and performance of different building materials, stone, wood, brick, metal, is also reflected in different buildings built through the ages across different regions in the country. We will then work our way through the science involved in forts, caves, and a range of religious monuments. We pay special attention to the evolution of the dome, the arch, and doorways. We see how amazing acoustics were worked into forts, buildings, temples. And finally, we explore the connect between astronomy and architecture. Let's set off right away. Our journey starts in one of the oldest cities in the world, Varanasi. But what makes Varanasi unique is not just the fact that it is ancient, but the fact that it has been continuously inhabited for over 3,000 years. Mark Twain, the American author, famously said about this city, "Banaras is older than history, older than tradition, older even than legend, and looks twice as old as all of them put together." So what were the beginnings of this ageless city? Myth has it that the city was built 5,000 years ago. All very well, but what evidence do we have? For that, we will need to travel to Rajghat, an excavation site in Varanasi itself, where remnants of city walls, pottery and artifacts dating back to 800 BCE have been found. The finds here include 300 seals, numerous earthenware pots, besides some coins, beads, ornaments and other objects of domestic use. The coins found here looked like punch-marked coins, typical of the Harappan civilization. They are so called because of their manufacturing technique. These coins came in as a substitute for the barter system and were a symbol of this period of intensive trade activity and urban development. Now, what is the science behind an excavation? For this, we travel to a live excavation site in southeast Rajasthan to find out more. This is a recent find. Excavation at this village called Panchmata started only in 2013-14. This site is believed to belong to the Ahad culture, dating back to 3000 to 1700 BCE. The people here had trade links with the Hadappans. A fair amount of pottery, mud brick walls, and domesticated animal bones have been excavated at this site. How does one look at a piece of pottery and figure its age? How do we date these archaeological finds? Well, it's by using a scientific method known as carbon dating or radiocarbon dating. This is a difficult technique, but let us try and get a sense of how it works. There are many carbon atoms in our environment. The vast majority of these are C12, the stable isotope of carbon. However, cosmic radiation constantly collides with atoms in the upper atmosphere. When this happens, energetic neutrons are created that bombard nitrogen-14, which then turn into a carbon-14 atom and a hydrogen atom. These atoms are chemically the same as stable carbon, but have 2 extra neutrons. This carbon-14 is radioactive, with a half-life of about 5,700 years. Over time, these radiocarbon atoms decay into nitrogen atoms. This tendency to decay, called radioactivity, is what gives radiocarbon its name. Now, what happens when an organism dies? It stops absorbing the radioactive isotope and immediately starts decaying. Scientists know that the carbon-14 decays and becomes about half every 5,700 years. This means that if you had 100 pieces of carbon-14 in you and we waited for about 5,700 years, half of it would now be gone, leaving 50 pieces. After approximately 11,400 years, half of that would be gone, leaving 25 pieces. This process continues on and on. Of course, after a few thousand years, it gets tough to count how much there is. So many scientists say it probably would only work for 50,000 years. Radiocarbon dating is simply a measure of the level of carbon-14 isotope within the organic remains. It is important to note that this may give us approximate, not exact dates, as the amount of C14 isotopes in the atmosphere can vary. Now back to the work at this excavation. The archaeologists here can actually look at layers in the dig and define different time periods. A lot of the finding here is based on building material. For example, buildings here were made of sunburnt bricks. The bricks were rectangular or square in shape, but not always of the same size. These bricks were made quite simply by mixing earth with water, placing the mixture into molds and drying the bricks in the open air. Straw or other fibers that are strong in tension were sometimes added to the bricks to help reduce cracking. Besides mud bricks, findings also show that stone and copper were also used by the people in this civilization, which shows us how material science and building material are critical to the longevity and strength of any city. If we travel through different cities, we can see the different materials used by India through the eons. Brick made from clay is the most basic building material, and one can see its use in sites dating back to the Harappan civilization, like the Kali Bangan site in Rajasthan, which uses bricks similar to the ones we found in this excavation site. Stone is the other common material used all the way from Ashok's time, like in the Sanchi Stoop, to Mughal monuments and colonial ones. Let us now head back to Varanasi and look at some other factors that help in the growth and survival of a city. easy access to water was a prerequisite. And so it's not surprising that many ancient cities were located on the banks of a river. Like Varanasi, which was situated on the west bank of the holy river Ganga. If one looks at the river alongside Varanasi, it forms a semicircular shape. This made it suitable for anchoring boats that would have come in for trading purposes. The defining feature of the Varanasi waterline are the ghats. These steep ghats are now used as public spaces, for rituals and for cremations. But as recently as the 1940s, the river was extensively used to transport goods and passengers. There are 84 ghats on the urban edge. Their number has increased over time as ghats were subdivided into smaller sections and the natural embankment was stepped and faced in stone. It is difficult to date the ghats. Some go back to the 14th century, but many are even older. They have been extensively renovated and extended in the last 3 centuries to allow access to the holy Ganga from the temples and shrines of this ancient city. Now, if we study the development of the city, it is clear that the ghats have been built keeping in mind the rise in the level of water during the monsoons. The city of Varanasi was actually constructed on a ridge at a lofty distance of 15 to 23 meters above the Ganga, which runs below. Creating a bridge between the river and the city, the ghats describe a crescent sweep over a 6.8-kilometer stretch. In some places, they are very steep. Now, why is this? Through different seasons, the level of water in the river rises and falls dramatically. But during the rains, the levels rise as much as 15 to 23 meters. When the river subsides, the steps were often seen to be covered with silt deposited by the Ganga. So, the ghats were carefully planned and constructed to protect the city when the river was in spate during the monsoons. Now, each ghat boasts of a slightly varying architectural style. They are lined by temples and other public buildings, old houses, pavilions, kunds, tanks, streets and plazas. These wide landings are always packed with residents, pilgrims, mourners, priests and tourists, making them a place to worship, bathe and to cremate the dead. Now let us take a slight diversion from Varanasi to see how other cities were built around the river.
Now we will take a short break. After the break, we have much more to explore. Welcome after the break. Now we will know more about the idea, the science and planning of a city.
All the great early civilizations, Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Harappan or Indus Valley civilization. Often the way water sources were tapped helped the growth or the fall of a city or civilization. The Chols of the south were able to build dams and hence access to water and food flourished, which played a big role in their growth. And as expected, it is clear that those who did not live near water sources sometimes perished or came up with innovative solutions. Water harvesting devices like wells and reservoirs, and this helped them to flourish. Fatehpur Sikri is a classic example of a city that failed, because it was not able to access water efficiently. Let's explore that in a little more detail. Fatehpur Sikri, the imperial city designed by the Mughal Emperor Akbar, is unique in the way its spaces are laid out. It has no streets but consists of a series of interlocking courtyards set to the cardinal points. The design of individual monuments is based on symmetry, but in the layout of the complex, the rules of symmetry are broken and asymmetry is deliberately employed. This unique layout may have been employed to provide flexibility in order to accommodate different buildings and spatial conceptions. But in spite of its stunning layout, this city was abandoned in 1595 AD. Soon after its completion, this was because the small spring-fed lake that supplied the city with water ran out. From Fatehpur, let's move to another planned city, Lutyen's Delhi, the last construction project of the British in India. This remains one of the supreme achievements of British architecture in any period of history and is considered as one of the most elegant and sophisticated urban landscapes anywhere in the world. Let's explore the genesis of this area, often considered the 8th city of Delhi. On December 15, 1911, King George V and Queen Mary laid the foundation stone for New Delhi, the new capital of British India. And one man was put in charge of this mammoth task, Edwin Lutyens, who was a self-taught, working-class genius of ethnic Dutch origins. After winning the commission to construct the new capital, Lutyens was presented with the biggest architectural opportunity offered to any British architect since his hero, Sir Christopher Wren, set about rebuilding London after the Great Fire. The construction of the new city was an epic project, involving no less than 29,000 labourers. And Lutyens masterminded every aspect of the construction, from the shape of the doorknobs in the Viceroy's palace, now of course called the Rashtrapati Bhavan, to the types of flowers suitable for planting in the roundabouts. Let's look at some key aspects of the city plan. Along the city's axis, he set out a vast rectangular mall, surrounded by government offices and crowned at its far end by an imposing palace for the Viceroy. And this palace was the pinnacle of Lutyen's Delhi. Lord Hardinge chose Raisina Hill as the ideal location for the Viceroy's palace. The first feature of the palatial building that catches a viewer's eye is the colossal dome surmounted on the colonnaded front facade, inspired by the stoop at Sanchi, according to architectural scholars, and not by Pantheon Rome, as Lutyens had declared it to be. The giant dome, measuring 22.8 meters in diameter, becomes visible from afar when one begins to walk towards the place from India Gate or the Parliament House. The Rashtrapati Bhavan is flanked by the north and south blocks on either side, which were designed by his friend Sir Herbert Baker. Baker designed these in an Indo-Saracenic revival style, where he incorporated Mughal and Rajasthani architectural style and motifs into a classic layout. Baker also helped build Rashtrapati Bhavan, and together they designed the Parliament House, built with indigenous Indian materials and by Indian labour. The overall architecture of the building shows strong Indian tradition and plenty of Indian symbols. As fascinating as these monuments are, we are more interested in the way Lutyens planned the city itself. He based it on the idea of a garden city with great avenues decorated with classical buildings amongst a lush landscape. Three major visual corridors dominated the layout, linking the governmental district with three other important monuments in the city: Jama Masjid, Purana Kila, and Safdarjung's tomb. The master plan was a network of radial spokes knitted across 85 kilometers. It is interesting to note that Lutyens had initially designed all the streets to cross at right angles, like New York. However, Lord Hardinge told him of the dust storms that sweep the city and insisted on roundabouts and hedges and trees to break the wind. He asked Lutyens to turn for inspiration to Paris, Rome, and Washington. And so, the roads eventually converged at hexagonal nodes. The entire plan reflects Lutyens' passion for geometric symmetry, showcased by the sequences of triangles and hexagons, sightlines and axes. Lutyens' plan is remarkable for the generous green space, watercourses, and the integration of trees and flower beds into the existing landscape. The avenues were kept very wide to create a majestic feeling. The other detail Lutyens and other city planners worked out was the specific trees planted all along these avenues. For example, initially only 13 species were chosen. Later, this was expanded to 16 species. The plan was to avoid very common trees. For example, they attempted to avoid all the common trees that the Mughals would plant as avenue trees. They didn't plant mangoes, the banyan, nor the shisham. Instead, they planted things like the peepal, the neem, jamun, and the arjun. He also planned different zones for government, for bungalows, and commercial areas. Within each area was a plan. Take the Lutyens' bungalow zone. Hierarchy was everything, from the kind of bungalows gazetted officers would occupy to the ones for British and Indian officers and their peons. From the size and height of structures to the size of gates and hedges around, each detail was mapped. New Delhi was to be the capital of the Raj for only 16 years. In 1947, the British returned to their island when the Indians won their freedom, and New Delhi became the capital of an independent India.
So we have explored the idea of a city and the science and planning that goes behind it. Through this series, we will explore details of Indian architecture, from materials used to different kinds of structures to the technique and science that powered so much of India. So that's all for today. I hope you liked our show. Don't forget to give your feedback on feedback@indiascience.in. We will see you again, so keep watching Building Blocks of Bharat for more insights into architecture, history, science, and of course, stories. Take care.